Hello, Land Talker fans. This is Jim Rothermich here, going to do another Land Talker YouTube episode. And I just wanted to say I haven't done this for a while. I got busy last fall doing appraisals and I bought a couple of farms and just couldn't get around to doing it. So today we're going to start out the new year and I'm going to try to keep it up, doing one episode a month. And this today's episode is sponsored by Land Hero, and Land Hero is software designed by Stephen Broxius, and it allows you to access my sale database. And so, if you're a land buyer, or you're a banker, a appraiser, or a realtor, farm manager, attorney, that you need current land sale information in the state of Iowa, Land Hero provides that to you. It's a subscription-based um, format, and you can access all of my sales and the sale flyers that goes with it, and we keep it current week by week. So if right now we have a lot of sealed bid auctions, and if you need accurate sale information, there's a way you can access that data in that county and get you the information that you need. All right, so now we're going to introduce our guest today, and that's Bill Rubis from Permanent Farming, and we're going to talk about feeding cattle under roof. Um, Welcome to the show, Bill.
Jim, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your listeners. And I love following you on Twitter and LinkedIn because you always have the latest and greatest sold, sold, sold. Bring
That's
bring the banker to town. So
yeah. No, I tell you what, Bill, that the land market really finished strong in December. You know, the first day in December we had a farm sale in Sioux County, Iowa, for $32,000 an
I
acre.
saw that. I saw that when you posted that.
And that beat the record, and which was set in Sioux County in
Right.
November of 2022 of $30,000 an acre. And so, and then like 4 days later, there's two farms sold in Mahaska County, Iowa. One sold for $25,500 an acre, and the other one sold for $25,000 an acre, which were price records in Mahaska County with distance.
Sure.
So just remarkable how steady that market has been and the strength it ended the year with. So
Do
um,
do you think the record prices are brought on, at least my opinion is they're brought on because somebody either has cattle or hogs under roof and it's a manure and then quality of building the ground with it. What are your thoughts on that?
oh, Sioux County, definitely.
Yeah.
Those guys are so livestock rich up there, cattle, hogs, dairy.
Yep.
Absolutely adds to the value. As a matter of fact, that $32,000 acre sale, I think there was a dairy by it.
Sure.
And I don't know if a dairyman bought it, but he could probably was pushing on it if he didn't buy it. But
Right.
I think an adjoining landowner bought that. So absolutely. Washington County, absolutely. Those hogs down there influence those land prices.
Yep.
Sioux County, huge influence. So it matters. Northeast Iowa, where there's a lot of cattle feeding up there
Yep.
in those buildings and such, they got to have places to put that effluent. And
Right.
one thing I notice up in Northeast Iowa is they don't have such the high CSR2 ratings
Correct.
as say, Sioux County or
Sure.
Central Iowa.
Right.
But they pour so much cattle manure on those hills up there.
Right.
They raise 200 plus bushel corn all day long.
Right. Exactly.
And that's how they do it.
Yeah.
And
I
so,
mean, just keep painting it black, right?
absolutely. So, well, Bill, we're going to talk about your company today,
Yep.
Permanent Farming, and what you do for them. But first,
Sure.
why don't you kind of introduce yourself and tell us about you and how you got to where you're at?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So clear back in '06, '07, I was running a concrete company and the had a call and we were doing big work, hospitals, schools, Bass Pro Shops, and even residential. And I had a cattleman call me and say, "Hey, can you come see me? I've got $40,000. I'd like some concrete." All he wanted was feed bunk apron. How many square foot could he get? And I said, so we figured it out and came back 2 weeks later, poured the concrete, came back at the end of the day. The guy handed me a check. I'm used to not being paid for 60, 90, 120 days doing commercial work. I thought, well, it's pretty neat. Spring, same guy calls. We do the same thing. This time he had $60,000. This day I spent the day with him and we talked the cattle industry. And after that, I was off to the races. We were, I was fortunate enough to do a project in Nevada, Iowa for Bill Cowser. A lot of people in your listening probably know Bill. He ended up winning the National Stewardship Environmental Award from the NCBA in 2010. And ever since then, all I've done is beef cattle under roof. Now we've seen a tremendous switch from bed pack barns to slatted floor barns, and probably 95% of what I build today is slatted floor barns.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I tell you what, Bill, my first part of my career was in the hog business. And when I graduated college in the late 1980s, 1988, the farm depression was still roaring on pretty
Sure.
strong. And
Yeah.
the CRP program had just come out. And so many I grew up in central Missouri, and so many farms in our area went into CRP. I mean, just whole farms just gobbled it up.
Yep.
There wasn't much left there to farm. And at that time, the only people hiring on campus was those big hog outfits in North Carolina. And their selling point is, if you'd come out here to North Carolina, we're building brand new farms, 1,000 sow, 1,400 sow, farrow to finish barns. Everything's under roof, everything's on concrete, nothing's outside. That's the future of the business. It's going to be this way. Everybody's going to be this way in 30 years. If you're not efficient, you're going to be out of the business in a period of and not too far distant future. In the foreseeable future, you will be out of business because the
Correct.
efficiency's going up and the way the genetics just changed totally. And
Sure.
so I signed on to that and I was part of that evolution from going from, mom and pop farms. That's what we did on our farm. We finished hogs, we farrowed sows. We also had cow calf operation on ground we couldn't crop. And we finished those calves too.
Hmm.
And they said that's not going to exist going in the future. And so I got out of the business because of the labor situation.
Sure.
There just was not enough labor to that I didn't want to be in that business anymore. And I moved on and got in the appraisal career because I'm the only employee I have to worry about. So,
Sure.
um, why talk about the evolution of the cattle business? It seems what you're telling me, we visited before this that it's going to start evolving. The cattle are going inside. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. So, in Iowa here, there were some slatted floor barns that were built in the 70s. And I honestly believe if the 80s farm crisis didn't happen, we'd have more animals under roof today than hogs do, as a percentage. Um, so the 80s farm crisis happened and nobody put up any cattle facilities to speak of, in my opinion, from 80, mid late 80s to early 2000s. And then when they started to make a comeback, um, everybody wanted to do monoslope bed packs. That was the hot thing up until, 2010, 11, 12, depending on where you're at in the upper Midwest. And then rubber matting really became the game changer. So it made it that you could feed cattle on slats similar to how the hogs were doing it. So we're collecting the manure underneath the slats and then pumping it once or twice a year and taking it directly to the field and knifing it in. Um, so that's been kind of the evolution. And, as the world changes, water becomes more scarce. We need to move more livestock back to where the feedstock is at. And the only way to do that will be to put more animals under roof. And really, the cattle are the last protein that's not done under roof. I mean, look at what we have here in Iowa. We've got chickens, turkeys, hogs.
Yeah.
Heck, we even have aquaculture today under roof. We're
Uh-huh.
doing shrimp and barramundi and different things like that as well. And obviously cattle. So I always say by the time your grandkids are our age, Jim, they probably won't see cattle just like they don't see hogs today.
Right, 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 right. Do you think part of the reason why we haven't seen that is there just hasn't been a lot of profitability in the cattle business?
I think it's two things, Jim. Profitability is one, but also the just the turn of money. If Jim, I'll ask you the question. If we had a pregnant sow that was going to drop little piglets today, when would they go to market from today? 6 months?
6 months, yeah,
Yeah. Cattle,
approximately.
yeah, cattle, it's 2 years, basically. So, um, and the gestation isn't 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days, it's almost a year's worth of gestation. So there's a situation where it's almost 3 years
Uh-huh.
from conception to harvest. So not only is it not real profitable, the longevity of the return on investment is longer than most outside investors would want to stomach. Where
Right,
I think
right.
the thing that helped hogs is they brought in outside investment to grow it,
Oh, absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely. I was part of that.
Sure.
I worked for Premium Standard Farms down there in Princeton, Missouri, and
Right.
um, an investor from New York come in there with $600 million, put up 50,000 sows, farrow to finish, and a 10,000, well, I don't know if it's 10,000, 8,000 head a day packing plant. So
Sure.
there was so much profitability in hogs, it was even bringing Wall Street money in at that time. I don't think
Correct.
it's so much now,
Correct.
but that's the way it was. And then Bill, as I drive around Iowa and the surrounding states, there was a lot of cattle fed in
Yes.
Iowa on
Yep.
dirt lots. The
Yep.
blue harvest stores are
Yep.
still prevalent to this day,
Right.
not in use, but are very prevalent. Do you
Right.
think um, ethanol and ethanol plants and corn starting to be used for that? Did that kind of put those small producers out of business because of that? Because corn got shot up to $4 or higher per bushel, and that kind of they kind of quit feeding cattle, didn't they?
Yeah, that you bring up a great point, and going back to what you said earlier, efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. When corn's cheap, when corn was, what was it back in those days, Jim?
Two bucks.
$2. You know what I mean?
At the top, it was two
Right.
bucks.
Right. I was going to say $1.75.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
at $1.75 corn, you can be a little inefficient. It'll be okay.
right.
At $4, and heck, what was it 2 years ago when we were nearly $8 corn?
Yeah, that's
You know
right.
what I mean? You can't be inefficient at $5 corn, let alone eight. So you are correct. The small guys that I almost considered them hobby farmers, they would probably be upset if I said that to them. They just couldn't afford the inefficiency anymore, you
Right,
know. So
right. So, that's why I think, now, last week I watched some of those posts by some sale barns in the area, and they had record cattle sales, and just mind blowing what those calves are bringing.
I looked at uh, some social media, and there was some six weights that brought over $3,000 a head. I don't know how that pencils. You know what I mean? So I don't care what the price of corn is. That's just a huge dollar investment. So
Right. So then after that, once you buy those animals, efficiency is the name of the game, and it's
got it.
rate of gain per day and
Yep.
um, how much corn you got to use to get that. So
Right.
so that's what we want to talk about today. So
Perfect.
talk about permanent farming and what they
Yep.
do
Yep.
and what you do for them, and let's start there.
Perfect. Yeah. So permanent farming really has, we're we're in the cattle construction business. So, and we really have two different tines, if you will. One, just the traditional, what you'd see when you're driving around thinking, oh, there's a cattle barn, just that individual family farm, 1,000, 2,000 head under roof, that sort of thing. We're in that market every day. But also with our team, we're looking at much larger projects that will go to many thousands of head under roof with digesters, with maybe a soil fertility. Are we going to, depending on the site, are we going to make renewable natural gas with a low CI score, or are we going to make electricity to potentially power an AI data center? So there's a lot of exciting things that are happening in real time that we're being very cognizant of to make sure that we're providing multiple revenue streams for the producer to maximize the efficiency of his cattle. We're basically, I always say we're in the food business, we're in the fertility business, and we're in the fuel business. Now, is the fuel electric or RNG? Depends on the site. There's a lot of things that we can do for fertility with the digest state. After there's still a lot of NP and K in that fluid, and then the food obviously is the beef cattle.
Uh-huh. Interesting stuff. So I'm showing your website, Permanent
Yeah,
Farming.
yeah,
So how long has this company existed? Who started the company? Can you speak
yep,
to that, Bill?
yeah, absolutely. So it's a real interesting team. The company's been around about 5 years. It's was started by Steve Polsky. He's our CEO. Met him about 5 years ago on a separate project, and became friends. And he's kind of put together kind of a dream team for us. We've got a guy that came out of Shell after 30-year with them, so he understands gas. And half the time when he talks, I just nod my head because it's way smarter than me. And then he's got a couple different ventures, with Standard Soil, and then ultimately Blue Nest Beef, which is a real interesting um, group unto its own. And then any company, we need a strong CFO. So we went out and got Todd Churchill, who heads up all ag and food for Clifton Larson Allen. They're the eighth largest CPA firm in the country. And so he was raised on a feed yard and has horses. And so, he's overseeing all of our financial strategies and that. I joined the team back in October to take up all the construction for the team. And then we've added a few more guys to the team since the end of the year, or around the end of the year. Guys with great experience coming out of Cargill, and different other guys that we've brought on to the Kip Pendleton is joined at our board as an executive director. A lot of great knowledge that he's brought to our team as well.
Yeah, I'm showing their profiles
Yep.
now as you were talking. So now you guys are located in Des Moines, Bill, or
So we're kind of all over the country. I live in Des Moines. I've been out here since the late '90s, and Todd lives up in Minnesota. Russ is a Houston, Texas guy because of Shell Oil. Will Hale, who's on our team, he was a Minnesota guy with Cargill. He's now in Tampa. He enjoys sunshine better than cold. So we're a little spread out, but it's amazing what we can do with Zooms and telephones and emails and all that today.
okay. Um, so if there's a family out here that well, typically how does the ball get rolling? How do you guys, if somebody's interested in putting up a cattle barn,
Yep.
if there's a time to do it, Bill, it's now. Cattle are worth more than they
Yep.
ever have been.
Yep.
The capital hasn't been in the business, but by God, it is now.
Correct. Correct.
you know, and so, cattle kind of moved west
Right.
before ethanol, but now we got ethanol and those DDGs. I think the cattle business should shift back here, back around these ethanol plants. And
You're 100% correct, Jim.
so kind of talk about, who would contact you and just get the ball. How's the ball get rolling if they want to
Yep.
talk to you?
Yeah. So um, we get a lot of inquiries almost on daily to our website, guys with simple questions. Sometimes they want to deep dive real quick. So the website is obviously a great way, or my cell phone, which is 515-418-1822. And just like you, Jim, it's always with me. So give me a call or text. So a lot of it starts that way as well.
Okay. Okay. And so they want to put up a cattle building. What do they put up a 500 head building? Do they put up 1,000 head building? How do you kind of guide them through that process?
Yeah. So, the first conversation typically is I'm asking a lot of questions about what's their current operation and um, where do they want to grow? A lot of guys, have a son or a daughter that maybe is graduating college, wants to come back to the farm. Um, Trying to farm a profit out of $30,000 an acre ground it's gonna take a family a while, you know what I
Absolutely.
mean?
Absolutely.
So maybe hopefully they have livestock currently, so they at least have some infrastructure. Then we're going to get into how many head do they have today? Where do they want to go? Do they want to custom feed or do they want to own their own animals? And then the other thing that's really important is, can they use the manure? So if you put up if you said, Bill, let's put up 1,000 head barn on one of your farms, Jim, you're going to have about 500 acres of manure to grow your crop every year. So it's basically 2 head per acre is the quick calculation. So, and that
Okay.
would, and that manure is typically 60-30-30 NPK. Most guys are putting between 4 and 5,000 gallons on an acre. So they've got 250 to, 300 units of N. So most guys aren't having to side dress or do anything outside of that.
So, so that's got to be appealing to a producer, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah,
The fertility.
yeah.
If there's anywhere in Iowa where you see a noticeably increase in land value, is northeast Iowa on those hills up there.
Correct. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, those guys have taken marginal
they
ground and made it really good ground. I wouldn't say great ground, but definitely really good.
absolutely, absolutely, and it sells very well. And so that I would think that's very important. So, um, so then, maybe they decide, well, they've got a family member. I'm assuming this is probably typical conversation, but they've got
Sure.
somebody coming back into
Yep.
the family. Um, so they think maybe 1,000 head building
Yep.
is what they want. So
Yep.
let's start that process
Sure.
of that.
Yeah, so now we're going to start getting into building design. There's probably a site visit to see, a lot of times a producer might think, hey, I've always thought about a barn here, which we certainly can talk about, but sometimes with a separate set of eyes on it, maybe it makes more sense to build it over there type of situation. We try to involve as many experts in it as possible. If you need help with permitting, depending on your certain current situation, we're glad to bring in guys that would help with permitting. We're really fluent in speaking all the government programs as well. Um, we partner with the Coalition to Support Iowa Farmers, great organization here in the state of Iowa. Nebraska has a similar one. Just about every state does. We're glad to involve them as well. And so we just bring a strong network of experts. Even if you need a banker introduction to get involved, there's a lot of different things that we certainly can bring to that conversation outside just the construction of the barn. If you need a nutritionist, we're glad to make recommendations on that as well.
So you guys have all the resources from beginning to end,
Correct.
and to help a producer through that process.
Correct. Yep.
And I've got your website up here on what you
Yep.
guys do here. So uh, on finished barns,
Yes.
Bill, say like 2,400 head or 4,800 head building. There's a lot of those. You're looking at 425 a space,
Yep.
40, $450 a space. So if you got a 4,800 head building at 450 a space, that's 2.16 million.
Yep.
So what would 1,000 head kind of talk through the costs of that, the capital requirement
Yeah.
of 1,000 head building?
It's a great question. I always say when a guy on that first call, they always ask that question. And I always say it's kind of like buying a pickup truck. Do you want the base pickup truck, the work truck, or do we want the loaded up fancy bells and whistles? But usually on that first conversation, I just tell them put in 2,000, $2,200 a headspace, and that's going to catch it. You know what I mean? Um, so right back to where you're at, Jim, about 2 million bucks.
Two
So
million bucks for okay. So that's that's not out of reason. I mean, if you're putting up a 4,800 head finish barn, that's you're going to be spending that.
Right.
Um, so I see I've got your website and I'm
Yeah.
I'm flipping through some pictures
Yeah.
here. It looks like you've got monoslope and gable style roofs.
Yep.
Well, how do you recommend that? And just
Yeah.
go, if somebody doesn't know what they want, how do you direct them into that?
Yeah. So, it's like trends, and I'm sure you saw it back in the hogs as well. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, monoslope, everybody thought that was the answer. But after doing extensive airflow ventilation studies over slats, it just makes sense to do a gable construction. Now, do we do an all steel gable? Do we do a all wood gable? Do we do a wood steel combo gable? Those are all decisions to be made through the process. But over slats, I'm a big proponent of doing a gable roof. I just think the ventilation, just get the air up and out as quick as we can, is better than a bed pack. Now, once a year, once every other year, I'll do a bed pack for a cow calf guy, and he really wants that monoslope, and we're glad to do that as well.
Okay, so you're saying a gable roof will provide better airflow
Yes.
than a monoslope.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
one thing I noticed, thumbing through your pictures, you don't have any mechanical ventilation in any of these buildings
Nope.
that I've
Nope.
noticed.
The only thing that could even be considered mechanical ventilation is, our preference is to run the barns true east and west. And so on the north wall, I do like to put a curtain just for those cold, blizzardy, snowy days, just trying to keep the bitter cold wind off their backs, and keeping the cattle dry.
So, and that's a double hemmed curtain,
Yep.
insulated curtain
Yep.
on
It's not insulated, just a curtain.
just
You want to put- Yep.
a double hem curtain on a controlled up and down winch that's thermostatically controlled,
No,
correct?
so in hogs, you are correct. They are thermostatically controlled. The curtain on the north wall for cattle, I always say it's probably used less than 10% of the year. Most of the time, we want the wind to the breeze, just to keep flowing through. You're only going to bring it down on those bitter -50 wind chill with
Okay. Okay.
it's not, it's drastically different than in the hogs. And so while they are electronic, very few guys have spent the money to put in a thermostat just because they're not used that much. So,
Okay. So it's a manually controlled
yep,
curtain and you're just pushing it up when it really gets cold.
yep, yep.
And then you don't have any, there's not a south side curtain.
No, we're exposed to the
It's
south.
it's wide open. Okay.
Yep, yep.
Okay. Um so obviously there's enough heat from those cattle in there that you don't need heaters in there probably.
Correct. Yeah, and they've got that nice fur coat. So,
Right, right. Yep, yep. Yep. And so okay, in the summertime, now explain that ventilation to me because I
yep,
you've got that north curtain down.
yep,
You don't have any stern fans in there. How you getting that air moving to keep those
yep.
cattle cool? I don't see any misters in there
Nope,
either.
nope. I don't want any of that. So in the summer, obviously the curtain's going to be wide open. And what ends up happening is, we've got 1,000 furnaces walking around. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So heat is rising, and so as heat is rising up through the open ridge cap,
Okay, that's open.
pulling.
The ridge
Yep,
cap's open.
yep.
Okay.
Yeah, if you and I were standing in the bottom of that gable looking up, we'd see blue sky. Um,
Okay. Okay.
so some people call it the Venturi effect, some people call it a chimney effect, but as the heat goes up and out, it's pulling in fresh air from the outside, both the north and south. So,
Okay. So if it's 100 degrees in Iowa, I know
yep,
we do have a few of those.
few of those.
What's it going to be like in there?
About 20 degrees cooler. It's no different than if you and I were working outside on your farm today, Jim, and we stepped around and worked on the shady side. It's going to be a lot cooler on the shady side than than the sunny side. So same thing.
Well, to be honest, in full disclosure, I was at a new building over in eastern Iowa. It's been
Yep.
probably 5 years ago. It was
Sure.
a hot day,
Uh-huh.
and they had started putting cattle in there. It wasn't full,
Right.
but but I was surprised how much breeze was coming through there.
Yep.
It was comfortable.
Yep.
And if they were outside, they would be, there was no doubt in my mind those cattle would have heat stress.
Yep. Yeah, uh, I'm sure you remember our old friend Mark Pearson, who used to be on the Big Show, and he and I would talk a lot about cattle stress and coat temperatures, and we would always go shoot coat temps on the hottest, most miserable days to see what the temperature was inside versus outside, and the coat temps would be anywhere from 15 to 30 degrees uh, cooler in the barn.
Yeah.
And one of the things, once the internal temperature of a ruminant animal goes over, I might be off a little bit, 106 or 107 degrees, that animal will never finish. It will never reach its potential because its body knows, oh, I'm eating, I'm getting warm. I better stop because I didn't feel good that one time. So it will never reach its potential in an outside yard versus inside a barn.
Yeah. And there's a good chance they'll fall over dead too.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want that.
Well, I don't know how many years ago it was, but there was some hot days where the nights didn't cool off, and
Yeah.
there was feedlots out west, western Kansas and Texas, and they just had those dead cattle just lined up in a row. I never seen anything like it before.
Yeah, that was tragic. I'm sure you and I saw the same social media post on that. And heck, we had a similar thing, not certainly to that scale, but what would it be? Would it be 2 summers ago or three, where we had a real similar situation? And there was a tremendous amount of death loss, more in the western part of the state than the eastern, um, where literally thousands of animals died because of heat stress. I will proudly tell you, I'm not aware of any animal that died of heat stress in a barn at that time.
Right, right, right. So to me, if you have one of these, this should give you an advantage over those southern feedlots, Texas, Oklahoma,
Correct.
Arizona, Colorado,
Yep.
um, because we're in a northern climate here, and so they shouldn't have to deal with that heat stress. Not to say you won't have some days of 100 degrees here, but
Right.
it won't be nothing like what they have down there.
Correct. Yeah.
You
And
know,
how, you probably know this number better than I. What's it cost to ship corn to Texas?
right, 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 right.
Buck,
Absolutely.
$2 a bushel. I don't know that number off the top of my head, but we've got a feed advantage over the southern producers just because we're growing the feedstock here. Right now, we're just sticking it on a train.
Right, right. And we have the ethanol plants to produce
Yes.
those DDGs, and I understand that's a very good feed product.
Yeah, and that's a whole emerging, we've seen in the last 15 years. I mean, 2008, 9, 10, ethanol plants would give the co-product away. They didn't realize it was a great feed source. Like I know there's some situations where guys literally got paid to be taking wet distillers because they had no room for it. And now it's the price of gold, it seems, in some situations. So
Right, right. So as far as a cattle barn, 1,000, let's say 1,000 head,
yep.
um, what's your square footage per animal?
So most guys, when we're first setting it up, obviously we need to talk how many animals per pen, and that will change the barn a little bit, minor. But most guys were thinking around 22 square foot, but it comes down to what are the management practices? I've got guys that are really aggressive that have gone down to 19 square foot. Now they're feeding multiple times a day. I've got guys that feed one time a day that are run at 24 square foot. You know what I mean? So it really depends on the management versus the barn I built.
Okay, okay. And then what do you figure on bunk space per animal?
I don't like going anywhere below 6. I would say most of my stuff is around 8 inches of bunk space per animal. Now, not at 8 inches, not everybody's getting to the bunk at the same time. The more aggressive ones are going to eat first, and the more timid ones are going to eat second. So so we're not looking, in the last 180, 200 days of an animal's life, we're not looking for them all to be lined up at the bunk at the same time.
So you might have to feed them a couple of times a
Yep.
day.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And then how many pens do you put in one in a barn, in a 1,000 head barn? How many pens would you
You
typically
know,
put in there?
so kind of goes back to the existing operation. Do they have outside pens that we're going to feed it? What's that size? I would say the typical number is around 150 head in a pen or 200. Those are kind of the two popular sizes. So you'd end up with 5 or 6 pens depending on the pen layout.
Do you have like in a hog barn, we would put, leave one pen open for sick pigs and tail enders, what have you. Do you
Yep.
have one of those pens in there? What would you do with a sick animal, or
Yep.
how
So
would you handle that?
yeah, it's a great question. Kind of goes back to what's the producer have currently? He may already have a sick pen. If not, let's say we're going to do 1,000 head barn and we're going to do a working facility and a truck load out on the end of the barn. Um, I would carve out part of that working facility area. That area would be slab on grade typically. We'd stick in an extra piece of bunk and an extra water and a few extra gates, and they would use that area for a sick pen just to get them off the slats.
Sure, sure. So you can have I see that I've got a picture of one of your working areas.
Yep,
So you can add that. That's part of that. Could
yep,
be if you wanted it part of the barn. Maybe a producer has another barn where they do that.
correct. Yep,
So
exactly.
it's just depends if what they have.
Yep.
Now, as far as water space per animal, what do you figure on that,
You
Bill?
know, I am I think water is the cheapest thing in the barn. I mean, and we just always want the animals to have great um, access to water. I really enjoy putting the water in the middle of the pen so they've got access on both sides. We're obviously eliminating nose to nose if we've got a different set of animals in the next pen. Um, Usually north of an inch per animal is a good measurement that is university validated.
Okay. And then as far as death loss on a turn, now let me ask you this. How do you stock those? Is it all in, on the hogs, we do all in, all out. It's not, you used to do continuous flow,
Yep,
had disease issues with that. Then we went to all in, all out. That helped control the disease. It didn't eliminate it, but it
right.
helped. Is that the way you are? So if you got an empty barn there, will you put 1,000 head in there, or will you stock it 85%? Or tell me how that is done.
Yeah, so it, it depends on the customer. So if the guy's going to fill the cattle with himself, with his own cattle, he's probably going all in, all out, would be a typical thing. Um, I would prefer him to be in more markets. Um, you know, the problem is you only get one sale day or two sale days a year if you're all in, all out. So it better be a good day. Um, but what we see a lot of times is the younger producer um, wants to come home. Maybe dad and grandpa are going to help with the loan, but he'll do a custom feed yard situation. So if it's a 6 pen barn, he might have 6 different customers. So he's not going to be all in, all out. You take one pen, Jim, and yours are going to be ready in 6 months, and I'm going to take the next pen, and I bought bigger animals. They're going to be ready in 5 months. So it just depends on the individual situation.
Right, right, right. Well, that custom feeding, that looks like that would be, for a producer, especially a young producer, that would be the way to go because, much like the hog business, those guys that have the hog buildings don't own those hogs.
Correct.
They're just getting paid to feed them. And so those young producers don't have to buy those cattle and have such a, I mean, right now it would be an astronomical capital expense. So if you put 7 weight cattle in there, how much is 7 weight selling for now, Bill?
Boy, would it be 2,800 a head? I bet. Be $4. You'd be another 2.8 million, and it's going to cost you what, another 500,000 to get them to finish.
Yeah, yeah.
It's another $3 to $4 million deal, depending on the young man's situation. So a lot of families can afford the 2 million. It's the next 4 million that.
Right, right.
So
That that's
yeah,
that's where I see that custom feeding would help that
correct.
building. And so, what yardage feed do you typically get on something like that?
It seems like the typical yardage fee is 50 cents per head per day. Now, obviously, there's some feed markup and vets, and it's no different than you and I going to a hotel. Our room costs us this, but geez, Jim, if you want a cup of coffee, they're going to charge you for it. Or you
Right.
want you want breakfast, they're
Sure.
going to charge you for it. So it's more than just the yardage rate. It really comes down to what are all the services that the producer can offer. Can he do some of the vet stuff himself? There's an opportunity there. Can he provide the corn that's taken for that's needed to fill the barn? Can he make the corn stalk bales? So there's more than just the daily yardage rate where a guy can, make a little money along the way.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then let's not forget, if he can use that manure, gosh, Jim, what'd you pay for NP and K on your farm per acre last year?
Well, I just bought them this fall,
Okay, all right. Well, what
but
are your
it's probably
customers?
worth $100 an acre, isn't it, Bill?
It's actually worth a little bit more than that. I would say it's probably worth $100 a headspace.
Okay.
So, after all the bills are paid, 1,000 head barn, there's about $100,000 coming back to the producer if he sold it or if he's just sold it internally to his family.
Yeah, yeah. And not too long ago, there was a fertilizer shortage, and those guys that had those hog barns were in the driver's seat because
Yeah,
they
I had
had
some
it.
guys that were making $150 a headspace because they base the manure analysis against the commercial fertilizer. And it's anywhere between 80 and 100% of commercial. And depending on the situation, it became a real profit center and still is a profit center today. But like you said, when it was outrageous, would that be 3 years ago? A lot of guys were really, really happy they had manure.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so I see your walkways. That's how you check those cattle. Is that right, Bill?
Yeah, that's always a fun add-on to put a catwalk above the cattle. Cattle buyers enjoy it, bankers enjoy it. It's a nice way to look at cattle, but it does not eliminate the necessity to get in the pens with the cattle to check them, firsthand.
Yeah. And so I'm gonna put my appraiser hat on for
Yeah,
a minute. So as an appraiser who does a lot of hog finish barns,
yes,
you look, hog finishing barn has long-lived components, and then they also have short-lived components.
correct.
And so I can see these cattle barns, they have a lot of concrete in it.
Yes,
So I would consider those all long-lived components.
yep,
And what I mean by that, they last the life of the building.
correct.
But as far as those rubber mats on top, those slats, that maybe the slats, those are probably going to have to be replaced, aren't they, Bill?
Yeah, I always say the only real wear item is the rubber mats. Um, you know, if if you and I build a barn on the same day, Jim, and I feed all heifers to 1350 and you feed all steers to 1800, I bet you my mats last longer than yours. I think the most of the mats today, I feel are probably 10-year mats. There's some premium mats out there that would probably go 12 to 15 years, but that is the one wear item on the construction for sure.
Right, right. And that's probably um, the biggest expense is in that short-lived items. That's probably the biggest expense of everything,
Exactly.
isn't it? And then
Exactly.
everything else is probably almost the life of the
Bulletproof.
building.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, what do you figure for an economic life on these? I'm just guessing. It looks like it could be 50 years.
Yes, I would feel very confident that it's a 50-year build. Um, I always say I've got um, two customers. I've got guys our age that probably don't need cash out of the barn that are probably going to, if they're going to borrow money, they're going to put it on a 10, 12, or 15-year amort. The young producer that's coming back that needs the cash flow, that probably needs some wages out of the barn, he's probably going to put it on a 20-year amort. So
Uh-huh.
that's common from what I see.
Sure, sure. Um, Now, Bill, we're kind of getting towards the end here,
Yeah.
so let's talk about the advantages first of put cattle inside.
Yep.
Why you'd pick a deep pit over a bed pack barn,
Sure.
and then let's talk about the disadvantages.
Yeah, absolutely. The advantages of a slatted floor barn over bed pack, it comes back to labor and efficiency. Once you have the CapEx, um, of the slatted floor barn, your manure management becomes a profit center. Where if you put up a bed pack or build, RCC concrete is talked a lot about. I get a lot of calls about that. You haven't eliminated any labor. And your manure management now costs you $200 a head space annually. Everybody always wants to push back on it, and I'm always glad to deep dive on that, where you've gone from a cost of $200 to a profit center of, 150, $200, $100 in an off year. That's a big swing to an operation where we need to be really, really efficient. So the big difference is just efficiency and manure value as well. The bed pack barn does still work really well for the cow calf producer, but Iowa, we finish a lot of cattle. We don't have a lot of cow calf here, so
Right.
it's not as popular as just finishing in slatted floor barns.
Right, right. Well, I tell you what, Bill, I think going forward, labor is part of the things that we're going to have to deal with in agriculture, and there's just not going to be enough, and the quality's not going to be there. So the way you can work through that is being as efficient with your labor that you do have as you can, and it definitely that deep pit barn looks like that is the most advantageous way to take care of that.
Yep, and you will see in the next 5 years, there will be feed yards built that have fully autonomous feed wagons. So we're, there are steps being made to reduce the labor today. Now,
Yep.
are those sites built today? No, but are they coming? They absolutely are.
Yep, yep. And then let's talk a couple of disadvantages of putting one of those up, Bill.
Um, cap,
Cost.
yeah, CapEx, God, that would be the only
'Cause
disadvantage. So,
right. Well, talking about, those hog buildings, they used to be pay off in 7 to 10 years, but
right,
now it's, way over 10 years. I think it's, maybe 15 now because they're
sure.
so expensive.
Would a banker go for 15 today, Jim?
I
I'm,
don't know. I don't,
yeah,
well, there's no new buildings going up there. At least there hasn't been. There might be, there's starting to be some profitability in the business now. There might be some going up, but I don't know of
yeah.
any. But um, Bill,
On your appraiser side, real quick, I'm sure you've probably struggled to appraise slatted floor barns, because there really hasn't been any sold. So,
absolutely,
so that,
absolutely.
that, that I think is testament to what is being built here in Iowa, that they're being built to last. And, if there is a transfer, it's usually from a father to a son. I wouldn't consider that a true sale. So,
Right, absolutely. It's not arm's length. And Bill, what I have done is some of those bed pack barns,
sure.
and I've watched farms sell up there in northwest Iowa with cattle facilities, and and this has been in the past, and nothing here lately. But when I start breaking those sales down, there's a lot of depreciation with those cattle buildings,
Yep.
beyond physical depreciation. What I
Correct.
mean by that is, I'm going to use appraiser terms here: functional
Sure.
obsolescence and external obsolescence, and that's just those are your forms of depreciation beyond physical, and sometimes it gets up 30 to 50%. And I've seen farms sell up there in northwest Iowa that had cattle facilities on one piece of ground and bare ground on the other, and the bare ground brought more than the land that had the cattle facility on.
Sure. Because they didn't have the labor to support the facility, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so I that's why I kind of shy away. There's just hasn't been enough sale
Sure.
information out there, and the depreciation beyond physical is kind of a shock to the system.
Sure.
And some of the bankers don't want to hear about that.
Right.
So um, so that's kind of I kind of it's easier to do the hog finishers because there's sales around, and
Sure. Yeah.
so now, Bill, just a couple more questions.
Yes.
Tell me what the cattle feeding industry is going to look like in 30 years. Back when I was in the 1990s in the hog business, they told us what it's going to look like 30 years
Sure.
from now, and they were right.
Right.
So I'm going to ask you the same question. What's cattle feeding going to look like 30 years from now?
I think it's going to follow the path of both the hogs and the dairy. So dairy has done, and the hogs, they both have been really, really efficient industries. They've narrowed it up and they know all their costs. And then they're also diversifying. You can't find a new dairy that doesn't have a digester to it. So they're bringing in other revenue streams back to the farm. So I think cattle feeding is going to continue to grow. I think it's coming back to the upper Midwest because we have the feedstocks. But I also think that we're going to see more feed yards of scale doing digesters, maybe bringing in a solar component, maybe doing a soil amendment. There's a lot of opportunities when you get to scale, and I think we're going to see a large scaling up in the upper Midwest of feed yards.
So you're saying 30 years, most of the cattle are going to be under roof.
All of the finished cattle will be under roof for
Okay.
sure. Yeah,
Okay.
your grandkids will never see cattle.
Yep. I have to agree with that. Um, Bill, what's a cow calf producer in Iowa going to look like in 30 years? What's that going to look like?
Boy, that I don't play in that field as much. I think the cow calf producer is going to grow his genetics. I think we have the best beef in the world today. I think it's going to continue to get better. I think the cow calf producer is going to again have to embrace some technology. We're going to have to start selecting the best bulls for our best cows to produce the best calves. So I see that as a big emerging opportunity. The problem, going back to you, Jim, is our farm ground is worth a lot of money. Even the marginal ground's worth a lot of money,
Yep.
and cow calf just takes a lot of acres. So
Right. Right.
that would be the detriment, the downside of cow calf producer, in my opinion, in the next 30 years.
Do you think cow calf guys couldn't put up some hoop barns or, like you said, the bed pack barns and increase their cow numbers on the same amount of acres and just turn more animals that
Absolutely.
way? That is
Yep.
possible.
Yeah, certainly is. Yep. Yep.
So no, that's interesting. I just I can see a lot of consolidation with the calf guys, but there again, as we talk about efficiency, that rate of gain, as expensive as these animals are going to be,
Correct.
going in those barns, they have got to perform. They have got to
Yes.
get the most pounds of gain on the
Yes.
least amount of corn it takes,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
and those genetics are going to drive the bus there.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, so that's right. See, and there's always times in the industry where things are pivotal, and I would say we're in that right now with the beef industry, with the way prices are,
Correct.
and it's going to change the game going forward, much like the hog business was changed, 30, 40 years ago. So,
Correct. Correct.
um, Bill, how if somebody wants to get a hold of you, I think you give your cell number, give it again. Tell
Yep.
just what do they do to
Yep.
get a hold of you?
Yep. A couple different ways. Website permanentfarming.com, or my cell number is 515-418-1822. Reach out anytime.
All right. Well, thank you for being on today, Bill. Is there anything else that we didn't cover? I knew we wasn't going to get everything covered we wanted, but we'll have to have you back and do another episode. But anything you want to say before we go that we maybe should have said?
No, no, I appreciate the invite and the time, Jim, and be glad to come back anytime that you want to talk cattle. Um, but no, just keep eating beef. It's the most nutrient dense protein that we produce in America. So just keep eating beef and call with any questions.
Well, I was listening to Joe Kearns he was on a podcast,
Sure.
and he was talking this beef thing's gonna be high for a while,
Correct.
and so let's take advantage of it and
Exactly.
get the capital into the business and get the efficiency up and make it a long-term thing for families to grow their family farms.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming today,
Thanks,
Bill,
Jim.
and I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim.